In the orchestra, you have four main brass instruments: the trumpet, the trombone, the French horn, and the tuba. The trumpet is the smallest one and makes the high sound, and the tuba is enormous and makes the very low sounds. Let's find out a little bit about each instrument. A trumpet is a brass instrument used mainly in classical music and jazz music. The most common type of trumpet is a B-flat trumpet, meaning that if the player plays a C, it will sound a B-flat in concert pitch. The trumpet is played by blowing into the mouthpiece and making a buzzing sound. There are three keys called valves that the players can press to change the pitch. A brief history of the trumpet. The trumpet has been around for about 3,000 years. An early example of a brass instrument like a trumpet is called a shofar, which is still used in religious ceremonies. Eventually, people started making trumpet-like instruments with wood, for example the cornetto, and later with brass. Modern bugles are similar to early metal trumpets. Many years ago, when the use of instrumental music was growing, trumpets became very important. Trumpets were long and without valves. This meant a player had to control the pitch of the sound with only his mouth, which was very difficult. Everyone respected trumpet players because trumpets were just so difficult to play. The chromatic trumpet, which is the instrument we use now, was developed in the late 18th century. In the 19th century, good valves made it easier to play notes on the trumpet. Still, trumpet is a difficult instrument to master. The trombone is a brass instrument capable of producing sound that is rich and brilliant, lower than the French horn but not as low as the sound produced by a tuba. The trombone was developed from the trumpet common in the medieval era and was documented in Ferrara court records in 1439. The Duke of Burgundy had a trombone player at his wedding in 1468. During the Renaissance and Baroque eras, the trombone was referred to as a sackbut or sackbut. It was lacking in some of the features of the modern trombone, but it had a double slide which allowed for lower scale sounds. The sackbut was the first musical instrument to have a moving slide. Interesting trombone facts. The word trombone is derived from the Italian word tromba, which means trumpet, and one, which means big. Together, they form the word trombone, which means big trumpet. The trombone's body includes a mouthpiece, first brace, second brace, slide, water key, tuning slide, and bell. Most brass instruments rely on valves to create varying pitches, but the trombone relies on the slide. The slide replaces the valves in other brass instruments, which use valves to select tubing length. When the trombone player moves the slide out, the note is lower, and when the trombone pulls the slide toward them, the note is higher. The first composer to create a symphony trombone part was Beethoven, who included it in his famous Fifth Symphony. The trombone is a popular instrument to portray dark moments in operas such as in Don Giovanni by Mozart or Till Julesspiegel by Richard Strauss. Left-handed trombone players must learn to play with their right hand being dominant because of its design. some of the most famous trombone players were actually left-handed. The French horn is a musical instrument, originally of the wind family. Horns were originally truly horns. People would blow into an animal horn to produce sound. However, eventually this shifted as the ability to make horns from metal emerged. The earliest horns were simply brass tubes with a flared opening. The addition of valves did not happen until the 1800s, and until that time changes in pitch were only achieved by the lips of the person playing the horn. It took a while for the use of valves to catch on. The French horn debuted in Paris in 1664 in the comedy ballet titled La Princesse de l'Aide. The French horn is now in the brass family because it's made from metal and the mouthpiece is metal as well. Facts about the French horn. One who plays the French horn or another horn is referred to as a hornist or simply a horn player. The musician's hand position affects note pitch, and this means the musician must be aware of more than lip tension and breathing techniques to play properly. The double horn is the most popular French horn used in bands and orchestras today. The French horn is the brass instrument with the widest note range today because of its fourth valve possibility. Prior to the use of valves, the musicians would have to cover the bell or part of it to create changes in notes. Many consider the French horn to be the most difficult instrument to actually play, and those who do must master it to be considered good. A French horn would be as long as 13 feet if it were to be uncoiled. The parts of the French horn include the mouthpiece, main tube, valve lever, finger rest, valve, valve tube, and the bell, which is flared. The mouthpiece of the French horn is shaped like a funnel. tuba. The tuba is the lowest pitched and largest in the brass family of musical instruments. The tubist, or tubaist, creates sound by blowing into the large mouthpiece, which produces vibration in the instrument, and then uses their fingers to press the valves to produce different sounds. The tuba was invented by Johann Gottfried Moritz and Wilhelm Friedrich Weyprecht, who were granted the Prussian patent number 19 in September 1835 for their bass tuba in F1. In 1838, the first tenor tuba was invented by Karl Moritz and Johann Moritz's son. Most tubas are made of brass and they can be left unfinished, which must be polished to keep from being tarnished, or plated with silver, gold, or nickel. Facts about the tuba. In Latin, the word tuba means horn or trumpet. A tuba's body consists of the mouthpiece, main tube, valves, and the bell. The tuba's sound is deep and rich, and it is the lowest pitched instrument on the brass family. A tuba is used to produce the orchestra's bass notes. They are usually found in jazz music and in brass bands as well. The tubist holds the instrument upright while playing, which is different than the way trombones or trumpets are held. Tubas became a member of the symphony orchestra in the mid-1800s. When tubas became a member of the orchestra, they replaced the ophicleide. The ophicleide was perfectly fine as an instrument, but clever marketing made the tuba sound more modern, and it soon replaced the older ophicleide. Standard tubas have approximately 16 feet of tubing. The most common tuba keys are F, E flat, double C, or double B flat. They may have between 3 and 6 valves. Now we move to the percussion section. The percussion section has hundreds of instruments that it could possibly play. However, today am going to talk about the main 4 standard instruments. They are the bass drum, the xylophone, the snare drum, and the timpani. The bass drum. The bass drum is a large drum-shaped instrument in the percussion family that produces a low pitch when struck with a mallet or beater on a pedal. The earliest version of the bass drum was the Turkish davul, tabul turkey, that existed in the 1300s. In the mid-1700s, many of these drums were brought to Europe and soon became a popular addition to military bands. The Turkish drums were played with a rod and a wooden drumstick, but when they were introduced into the orchestra by Spontini in the 1800s, they were played with mallets covered in felt. Facts about the bass drum. The bass drum, as part of a drum kit, used in bands along with several other drums, was added in the beginning of the 1900s as part of jazz music. The inventor of striking the bass drum with a bass pedal was William F. Ludwig in 1909, Chicago, Illinois. Adding the bass pedal to the drum kit made it possible for the drummer to play other percussion instruments, such as a snare drum, as well as cymbals, because their hands were free to use smaller drumsticks. Bass drums were made with a shell cylinder that is usually made of a type of wood, occasionally metal, with 2 heads, the part struck by the mallet or bass pedal, stretched over two open shell ends. Most bass drums are stationary, as in the drum kit setup. However, when the bass drums are used in marching bands, they must be movable and are suspended by straps or other apparatus to enable the drummer to walk with the instrument. In the orchestra, setting the bass drum is suspended in a frame that allows the drummer to change its position or angle. It is usually suspended by rubber straps or leather straps or even wires.
Absolutely amazing. I had no idea that one could produce sounds like this on bass drum.
It becomes bigger and bigger and bigger on the stage. It's this fire-breathing dragon. It's an electrifying piece.
It may be the world's first concerto for solo bass drum. The composer is Gabriel Prokofiev, grandson of Sergei Prokofiev and a friend of Princeton music professor Simon Morrison.
Completely unlike his grandfather. He does these wonderful club nights in which they mix and match different modern pieces of music. He's got a label that does that.
Gabriel Prokofiev's musical background is eclectic.
When I was 10 years old, I formed a band with a friend doing pop songs.
His concerto for bass drum was influenced by British percussionist Joby Burgess.
The xylophone. The xylophone is a musical instrument with wooden bars that are struck with a mallet to produce sound. The wooden bars are arranged similarly to a piano, and each one is a different length, which creates a different sound. It is believed that the xylophone dates back to ancient Southeast Asia, 2000 BC, and that the instrument was brought to Africa by Malayo-Polynesians. The Western xylophone, which is the one most are familiar with, is first mentioned in Europe in 1511. It was referred to as wooden clatter at the time. It wasn't until the 1860s that the term xylophone was used to reference the instrument. Facts about the xylophone. The xylophone is a member of the percussion family of instruments. Different versions of the xylophone have existed for many years in many cultures. The African xylophone is referred to as the balafon. In Mozambique, the xylophone is referred to as the mbilia. In Ghana, Burkina Faso, Mali and West Africa, the xylophone is referred to as the giel. In Western Zambia, the xylophone is referred to as the silimba. The early xylophones in Asia were often created with wooden bars attached to gourds. Today, the frame of the xylophone is made of wood or metal. The xylophone gained popularity internationally in the 1800s when the Russian musician Michael Joseph Guzikov toured with his instrument. Between 1910 and 1940, the xylophone was popular in vaudeville acts. Jazz musicians often used the xylophone in their bands until the vibraphone became more popular in this style of music in the 1940s. In the 1970s, the xylophone became popular in ragtime music. The bars of the xylophone are often made of rosewood or kellon, a type of fiberglass. The snare drum. The snare drum is an instrument in the percussion family that is considered a main part of the drum kit and is found in a variety of bands. The snare drum is usually played with a drumstick and can be found in concert bands, marching bands, parades, drum lines, and in rock bands and modern music. The snare drum is also referred to as the side drum and is the smallest cylinder drum. The snare drum is derived from the tabor, which is a drum that was originally used for accompanying a flute. The snare drum has two heads, and most often they are made of plastic, but some are made of calf skin. The drummer hits the snare drum head with a drumstick or beater that can vary from brushes to the drummer's hands. Snare drum facts. The snare drum can be made of metal, acrylic, composite, fiberglass or wood. The snare drum consists of a shell, snare release lever, tensioning brackets, counter hoop, tensioning screw, and the tensioning mechanism. The snare drum became a member of the orchestra approximately 2 centuries ago. The snare is often referred to as a side drum by the British or those from the Scottish Highlands. In Italy, the snare drum is referred to as a tamburo piccolo, which means a little drum. There are different types of snare drums, including the marching snare, which produces a deep tone, drum kit snare, smaller in depth than the marching snare, piccolo snare, that produces a higher pitch, tabor, original snare from the 1300s, a tarol, a smaller than kit snare, and the caixa malechita, deep snare from Brazil, used in samba music. The snare drum produces a definite pitch. Prior to the 1900s, a definite pitch was avoided in the snare drum, but today it is required in some cases. And finally, the timpani. The timpani are instruments of the percussion family that is also often referred to as the kettle drum. It was introduced to southern and western Europe in the 1200s and they spread north soon afterwards. These first timpani were pairs of kettle drums and remained in use until the 1500s. The larger version of the timpani spread in popularity across Europe in the 1400s. Over the next few centuries, variations emerged and the aristocracy used them along with trumpets as signalling instruments. When gunpowder was invented, the kettle drum was not needed for signalling, but remained as an instrument, used for festivals and in church music, and it eventually made its way into the orchestra music and modern music of today. We are really lucky in our area that we have two of the oldest orchestras in Great Britain. We have the Slough Philharmonic, which happens in Slough, and the Huddersfield Philharmonic Orchestra, which happens in Huddersfield Town Hall. Slough is an industrial village in the beautiful Colne Valley near Huddersfield in the West Riding of Yorkshire. Here, a group of amateur musicians met in 1891 to found a philharmonic band. In its long history, it has experienced both triumph and disaster, but for some years now it has enjoyed uninterrupted success, recognised by the award of the National Federation of Music Societies Sir Charles Groves Prize in 1993 and a Performing Rights Society Enterprise Award in 91 and again in 96. Each season, the 80-strong orchestra gives 4 concerts in Huddersfield Town Hall and further concerts in other venues, including their home venue of Slough Civic Hall. Its conductor from 1969 to 2001 was the late Adrian Smith, who was also the orchestra's historian and publications editor. Adrian was succeeded by Chris Holding, who made his debut with the orchestra in January 2002. In October 2008, Benjamin Ellin was appointed musical director. Under Benjamin's Ellin direction, the orchestra's reputation for bold and adventurous programming, as well as champion repertoire often neglected by professional orchestras. The 2016-17 season was the Slough Philharmonic's 125th anniversary. In 2008, Mr. Simons, yes me, was the leader of the orchestra for 3 years. The Huddersfield Philharmonic Orchestra performs concerts 5 times a season, either in Huddersfield Town Hall, Dewsbury Town Hall, or Huddersfield Parish Church. They bring together a mix of players, young and old, from the town and surrounding areas who share their talent and love of music with each other every week. This orchestra is more than 150 years old. This is the end of the guide to the orchestra. I hope you have enjoyed learning about the different instruments and the sounds that they create. If you feel inspired and would like to play an instrument, please tell your teacher so we can sort out a form for you to take home. Thank you and enjoy your music.
Can you imagine a world where you can pause time for the people you